Good evening. Welcome to this meeting of the Merrimack School Board this Monday evening, August 17th, 2015. Would you rise and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. One quick announcement before we begin. Board member Gualyumi is excused from tonight's meeting, and we hope she feels better soon. Which takes us now to item number 2 on tonight's agenda, approval of the July 13th, 2015 minutes. Is there a motion made by Mr. Powell, I believe? Yes. And is there a second? Made by Mr. Schneider. Any amendments? None? I didn't. Okay, I think I had a couple. There were very good minutes, Rose. Let's see. On page 4 of 13, on line 150, where we talk about the Safe Routes to School Committee was headed up by Tracy Bull. If we could just say previously, because she's not heading it up currently, so that would just clarify that. And then on 153, when the paragraph ends, if we could just strike the phrase jurisdiction was noted, and if we could just add the words some projects were within school district control, others under the town or the state. For example, the O'Gara sidewalks is a project that the school could oversee and will be scoped as part of the O'Gara repaving. Thank you. And then I believe that might be it. And that was it. Very good minutes. So with that, we will put the minutes to a vote. All those in favor of accepting the July 13th, 2015 minutes as amended, say aye. Opposed, none. The motion carries 4-0-0. Which takes us to item number 3, public participation. This is an opportunity for the public to address the board. All we ask is that you come to the microphone and state your name and address for the record. Seeing no public here beyond those with an agenda item, we will close public participation and move to item number 4, acceptance of gifts or grants under $5,000. Business Administrator Matt Chevena.
Thank you very much. Tonight we have 2 gifts coming to the Merrimack School District. The first is from the NHIAA, the New Hampshire Interscholastic Athletic Association. They are involved in trying to keep kids making good decisions, so they have a Bureau of Drug and Alcohol Services program, and they donated to Merrimack High School the sum of $636 to have training for coaches, parents, and the community to keep student athletes from making bad decisions in the area of drugs and alcohol. So we appreciate that very sincerely. The next item we have is from Target, and it's for Teacher Appreciation Program. It's $100 to James Mastrocola Upper Elementary School, and it will be used for the teachers for classroom supplies. So Target Teacher Appreciation Program, $100. Thank you.
Wonderful, thank you. Is there a motion? Vice Chair Barnes.
I move that we accept the gifts from the NHIAA and Target Corporation with our sincere thank you.
Thank you. Is there a second? Made by Mr. Schneider. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, none. That motion carries 4-0-0 as well. And that takes us to item number 5, the consent agenda. Dr. Mark McLaughlin.
Thank you. Under consent tonight, we have the following teacher nominations. Kevin Bowden, special education teacher at Merrimack High School. Lindsay Caban, grade 3 teacher at Reed's Ferry School. Megan Donegan, kindergarten teacher at Mastrocola Elementary School. Andrew Gagney, science teacher at Merrimack High School. Kelly Grassini, nurse at Reed's Ferry School. Douglas Polly, technical education teacher at Merrimack High School. Connor Phelps, science teacher at Merrimack High School. Aaron Regis, special ed teacher at Merrimack High School. Rachel Shaughnessy, preschool teacher at Mastrocola Elementary School. Daniel Varela, special education teacher at Mastrocola Upper Elementary School. In addition, we have the following teacher resignation: Brian Tassini, Merrimack Middle School. And finally, on consent tonight, approval of the restraint and seclusion policy.
Thank you. Mr. Powell.
I move that we accept the consent agenda as presented, and also, if I'm not mistaken, we have a couple alums on this list, don't we? Daniel Varela and the other one? Douglas Pauly, yes, thank you.
Thank you. Is there a second? Made by Mr. Schneider. All those in favor of accepting the consent agenda as presented, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, none. 400 again. And that takes us to item number 6, food service program highlights. I would invite to the table our food service director, Mr. Dave Zeke, who is joined, or would you like to introduce Ms. Bruno? Okay, wonderful.
Thank you for having me here tonight. It's a great pleasure to be here with announcements of good news and things like that. So, the Merrimack School District is part of the whole School Nutrition Association of New Hampshire. We have taken on the district-owned membership, which gives every one of our employees the opportunity for future education credits, and each year the School Nutrition Association has some awards that they do hand out, and one of them is the Employee of the Year Award. The Employee of the Year Award is given to someone that's dedicated to child nutrition, has commitment to future education as far as, of course, servicing the children every day. And this year, the New Hampshire School Nutrition Association Employee of the Year is Harriet Brunel from the Merrimack Middle School. Harriet. Harriet was nominated by one of her peers, and the thing that's great is that Harriet's been here for 10 years, and I just told her it seems like yesterday she started, but it's been a great time. She's always able to help out, able to help with the kids. Definitely is at the job almost every day, and is a vital importance to the middle school's lunch program. And it's really nice that one of the fellow employees was there to put her forward and nominate her for the School Nutrition Association's Employee of the Year. That nomination goes to the Scholarship and Awards Chair on the School Nutrition Association New Hampshire Board, and then they're picked as the criteria that they handed out. So definitely a very nice nomination, and congratulations again, Harriet. Harriet was honored at the Spring Conference in Manchester in April, and she got to meet the national president this year, who was able to visit New Hampshire, and that was an honor as well. So, again, thank you. Did you have anything to say?
Harriet, on behalf of the board, and I'll open this up to my colleagues as well, I want to thank you, first off, for your dedicated service. It's nice to be recognized, and you know, you show up every day over 10 years and bring, according to the criteria for the award, customer service skills, creativity, dedication to education, and a dedication to nutrition. You do that every day. To be recognized now is great. It's a one-time event, but I want to thank you for your day-to-day service as well on top of that. And congratulate you.
Excellent.
Vice Chair Barnes.
Yes, and you're going to have 2 Barneses in your building next year, but and so keep your strength up with the nutritional stuff we have in the building. That being said, I just wanted to say that when parents come up for the middle school orientation, one of the highlights of the evening is the great food service program, the options, the staff. You know, it's actually a highlight of their tour when 6th graders come up. They come back, and it's usually the first things Mike had ever talked about were, you know, how cool the school lunch was up in the middle school and how cool everyone was. So, you know, it's definitely, you make an impression even before their first day of school with orientations, and it's a great job you guys do up there. So wanted to thank you for all you do and keeping my Barneses, you know,
Fed.
healthy and fed. But have a great year ahead, and good luck to you with 2 Barneses. So.
Thank you. Anyone else? No. Okay.
Very good, thank you. The second thing is that this year was the first year that I was able to put in for a grant for equipment. Usually, when the Department of Ed puts out grants for the state, there's criteria that you have to meet, and one of them is free and reduced population, and we usually fall well short of that. So this year there was some monies left over from the 2014 grant, and just a short time before school ended, there was a memo that was sent out, and I kind of looked at it and I said, no, this is, forget it, I can't do it again. But then I read it again, and it said that the criteria will be lifted in order for them to use up the funds. So I went over and saw Marge and said, can we do this? And we put it forth. We did have a piece of equipment that was budgeted to be changed, and we were able to submit it prior to the June 30th deadline, and July 2nd we got notification that we were accepted. So excellent. I thought that was a little.
That's an awfully prompt turnaround time, too.
Especially, I didn't expect it at least before the 4th of July. But maybe
that's great.
give them a week. But absolutely. So I was very pleased. We should be. It should be at least 50% of what the cost of the equipment is, and possibly 100% if they do have enough money in the funds. So that's a big help for us.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. And thank you, Marge, for being there and signing off on it. Finally, the food nutritional guidelines update. Of course, every 5 years they do a reauthorization of the program. So 2010, they being Congress, took a look at all the child nutrition programs, and they handed down some fairly strict tiered guidelines. So every year there was a new thing that maybe came up on us, and this final year they included 100% whole grains foods for all foods that we serve. There was a salt reduction, a sodium reduction in some of the foods that we do serve, and an increased amount of fruits and vegetables, which, you know, these are all good things. But when we went to Washington in March, we looked at some of the things that may have inhibited some of the students to come back and buy lunch every day. And sometimes it's just the taste that, you know, makes a difference. So we talked to some of the legislators in Washington and asked if they could possibly, when reauthorization came around in 2015, make some adjustments and flexibility to those The reauthorization ends September 30th, 2015, so we won't know anything yet. But in the spring, there was a bill that was issued by Senator Hoeven that had some of the flexibilities in there. So it possibly could be back to the 50% whole grains, and maybe lessen up the sodium target so it's not as strict as it could be by 2017. Because in 2017 they're going to reduce the sodium levels again. So with that said, we're still using the same nutritional guidelines as we have last year, but there may be some relief in the near future. So
Wonderful. So just to clarify, because I think I know the answer to this, but you were in Washington
yeah,
at a conference of Student Nutrition Association.
yeah, 990 professionals were there.
Okay.
From all over the country.
And you were there because you are the president of our state's Student
Correct.
Nutrition
Yeah.
Association.
Yeah.
Okay. Your humility, I think, prevented you from sharing both your role, where you were, and why you were there, and how you obtained the information. But I think that that's important.
Okay, appreciate that.
And thank you for your leadership.
Thank you.
Are you open to
Sure.
questions from the board? Mr. Powell.
Well, congratulations on your leadership role, and thank you for representing Merrimack and New Hampshire up there. The first question I have is back on the grant that you were able to get. Are there any strings attached, other than the submitting the invoices, yada, yada, yada? Are there any strings attached?
No strings. Again, they were trying to utilize all the funds that they had available in 2014 so they could go forward with the 2015 grants that they would like to get from other schools. So I think it was just the fact that they had some extra funds left over and just wanted to use those up. I just have to submit. I had to submit the proposal, and then I'll have to submit the invoice when I
Right.
get that.
Okay. Well, thank you again for keeping your eyes open for that. The other question that I have is regarding the nutritional guidelines you were just speaking of.
Sure.
Are these mandatory for all school districts or just for those that are receiving federal monies?
For those that are receiving federal monies.
So in theory, if we chose not to receive federal monies, we could opt out and you could design your own program as far as what foods are served.
In theory, yes, you could do that. I think there has been one or two that would opt out, and the problem that I see with that is you lose federal monies, you lose commodity foods. We receive a lot of commodity foods from the USDA, and those delivered to us at our doorstep for $3.75 a case. So we're talking, 40 pounds of ground beef, 40 pounds of diced chicken, fresh fruits and vegetables, canned goods, and it's very hard to turn that away.
Sure.
It doesn't mean that those schools are just going to throw their hands up in the air and hand out Twinkies and ring dings. They're still going to have that commitment to give good nutritional foods. Unfortunately, they're either going to have to raise the prices for those students, and they're going to have to worry about the free and reduced students that need to be handled as well. So there are some setbacks to going out on your own and dumping the National School Lunch Program. So I'd be very wary as to even look at that option, and see what happens with the reauthorization in 2015.
Okay. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Mr. Schneider.
Yeah, just to carry that just a half a step further. So have you talked to any districts, or have you heard anything in terms of how much extra the district would, the taxpayers would have to come up? Because you would think that, the argument is people are buying fewer and fewer lunches because the food is not, palatable to students. And the argument is if you made a more palatable lunch that more people would buy, which would increase your revenue. But I would imagine you would need more inventory, and the inventory would be more costly, and you don't get the federal funding for the free and reduced. So it'd be of interest if you come across a district that's done this.
We may see, I think it's still a little early because Salem did opt out midway last year, and I think it's still too early for them to turn around with any numbers, but maybe after the year's anniversary date comes around, we might be able to see some of those.
It would be good to
numbers.
understand, because we hear a lot, especially when election time comes, you hear all the complaints that people have about school districts of varying ones, and you hear a lot about lunch, especially when you hear of a district choosing to opt out.
Yeah.
And they've been on a tightrope, I'm sure, without the net underneath them for a while.
Yeah.
So it'd be good for us to just learn how they've.
We're all interested.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's my understanding that the two districts, I think Londonderry's the other one, both opted out mid-year, so December, and only at the high school level, right? So not across the board.
And Londonderry, I think, just voted on it in the spring, so I think it's
Oh, so
starting
they're
the
even
school
later,
year.
so they
Yeah.
even have less data. But it will be interesting.
Yeah.
I guess the thing that I find encouraging from the conference in Washington is that perhaps some of the very well-intentioned directives might be wound back, which gives us time potentially to look to those other districts to see how their experiment has worked before jumping full bore into it.
Absolutely.
That's the way I look at it. Vice Chair Barnes.
And I know, really, we're back to the guidelines update. And I know that a couple of years ago, we had to do an adjustment on rates because food prices were volatile at the time. I know eggs are something I look at, and it's a volatile market. I think you probably have a couple of ingredients that may fall under that volatile price category. So do any of the flexibility in the guidelines that may come forth help you with cost controls to make sure we don't have to do adjustments in rates? From what you can see, I mean, you're not
Probably not that much, because a lot of the things that we do have are on bid. So for this coming year, at least, should be stable, with the exception of fresh fruits and vegetables, which change every month. So I would say that the regulation changes, if there are any coming, would just give us a little more flexibility to make the meals a little bit more flexible as far as the whole grains and such. So.
Okay, thank you.
I also recall that at the time that we were raising the rates, a part of that was also due to some of the federal directives around rates and what they should be, and actually our ability to deliver the lunch at a lower cost existed, but we still had to raise the rate in order to comply with the program, which was a little bit frustrating.
Yeah,
as
that
well,
was the
right?
the paid lunch equity
Right.
part of that reauthorization, and it took the control, the local control away, and we have a form we have to fill out each year and document where our prices are at, where our average prices are, and if we need to raise them again. So luckily, we still have a little credit left.
It's a beautiful experiment in economics. So we're going to require you to put a less palatable product out and charge
And
more
charge
for
more.
it and see how things work out for you. Interesting.
Believe me, myself and Mr. Zicki had a very animated conversation about that in my office as I just, looked at him in disbelief when getting the information. But
Yeah, it was animated, and I reached out to the regional director from USDA, and he was like, "No, you have to raise them." I'm like, "But I don't want to."
Yeah.
It's gonna hurt. It's gonna hurt the programs, and
Right.
and it did. And we took a little hit when we did it. So
Yeah. Well, it'll be interesting to hear about the changes that might be forthcoming, and as well from some of your peers' experience in backing away from the program.
absolutely.
Are there any other questions or comments for Director Zicki? No? Thank you again for a comprehensive report, and congratulations again, Ms. Brunel. on your award. Well deserved.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good night. Thanks for coming out on this hot evening.
I hope it's cool or not. I don't think so.
Have a good night. And that will take us now to item number 7, presentation of the 2015 to 2020 Merrimack School District Logic Model. I'll turn this over to our superintendent, Ms. Chaffrey, and Dr. Mark McLaughlin, Assistant
Thank you.
Superintendent.
Thank you. I think I want to begin by saying first something that you all know, but I'm not sure that our public does, which is why would we have a logic model in the first place? And this document has become very important to our school culture because it really sets forward guidelines and what it is that we want to attempt in our long-term future and our short-term future for the good of our students. We call it a roadmap for success because we think if it's properly implemented, that's what we should reap on the far end. So I think it's important to start with why, and also to say that really we got the notion about doing this type of a plan in working with Learning Innovations West Ed. We began working with them back in 2005. The thought that it would be as important or perhaps more important than a strategic plan, which often takes years to put together, and then it might be a bit static, but this is ever evolving. And so the thought that it would be helpful for our district as well as very helpful in grant writing, which we have found to be true. So the good thing is that when we go to put it together, we work with a governing body, you, the board, and then the leadership team, which then comprises 24 of us, to sit together and talk about where we've been and where we want to go. So the logic model, as you know, is really comprised of 5 elements, the most important probably being in the impacts, because in the long term, it tells you what you want to try and achieve. And to get to those impacts, you need to have goals, and to realize the goals, you need some objectives that happen more quickly. And then to accomplish those objectives, you need some strategies or some activities to know how to do it. And foundationally, probably the beginning, if you will, are the inputs, or what plans do you have in place? For example, our technology plan, the capital improvement plan, professional development plan. We have a lot of plans in place. We have policies, procedures, regulations, budgets, a lot of support on the part of the parents, and those are all the inputs that help you realize the goals. So we've spent time trying to really focus in on what is it that we want for our students. And I think if we were to sum it up for impacts, what we really want to see over time is student growth in what I would say are the major content areas: reading, writing, mathematics, science, and social studies, which is not to say that all of the other subject areas aren't important, but the ones that I've just named are really kind of centermost. And so over time, we would hope that we would see a real trajectory and that students would continue to grow. And it is our intent to have measures in place so that we can find out if that's true. And if not, if students aren't growing, why not, so that we can make adjustments. Likewise, we realize it's very important for our students to be really consumers of lots and lots of information and technology, and to try and figure out, what is valid for what I'm doing. I mean, should I use technology? If so, why so? Or is there another method? And then with all the information that they have to face, to be able to leverage what's most important for what it is that I'm doing. And then we're also about trying to establish an environment that really promotes learning, self-directed learners, if you will, who are learning for their whole life and for going out and applying what it is that they learn in school. So those are what I would say are the major impacts, and then we have a lot of elements, obviously, that speak to those. What we're very hopeful is that in giving you this document that was prepared by us as a group of 24 and then edited, and you'll note that from the time that we sat together, you'll know that there were some significant edits. By that I mean some things were eliminated. In our original plan, you remember that we had the District in Need of Improvement plan and School in Need of Improvement plans. Those plans have been eliminated because those were tied to the NECAP assessment. That assessment is no longer in place. Now we have an assessment called Smarter Balanced. So anything that we were once doing in those two areas have gone by the by, and in the future, I'm sure, off the results from the Smarter Balance assessment, there will probably be something else. But if we had that down, it just would not be important at this time because the state doesn't recognize that. So that's one example where we've eliminated something that we had in the original logic model. Likewise, you'll see something that's more contemporary, which are competencies. We've been talking about competencies at the high school and competency grading, and you'll see that competencies now are very much a part of what we're doing. So where you have some elements that are eliminated because they're not contemporary, you have other elements that have come to the fore because that's where we are at this point in time. So I've given really a general overview, given the fact that you were some of the ones that put the elements together, the logic model together. I thought you might have questions about it as it comes before you. And I also wanted to have Mark weigh in too, because he was a part of the editing team, to see if there's anything that he wanted to highlight before we open it up for questions.
So just to build on the superintendent's comments, I think that when folks look at the logic model, you'll see a couple of themes. One of them, is the use of data. It's a very important thing. Data is one of those funny things, though. It can be, you can just generate numbers, but unless you know that the numbers are supposed to tell you something and that you're supposed to do something with what they tell you, it's just numbers. So we've talked a lot about the appropriate use of data in the logic model. RTI, response to intervention, as a comprehensive strategy to address the needs of all students. RTI is a regular ed strategy, and we've really embedded a lot of what we do in Merrimack around that, and that's reflected here. As the superintendent said, increasing students' ownership over their own learning, teacher talk would talk about student agency, but the idea that a student has to be encouraged to be a partner with the teacher, not a passive receiver of knowledge, but a worker of the knowledge, and encouraged to make connections between things they've learned in one class or in one grade and other grades. And then, as we've been saying for such a long time, there's very little that matters in education and learning unless there's an understanding of its application. And so the logic model speaks to the application of learning and helping students and teachers to recognize and to seek ways to make what they learn applicable so that they can use it for their purposes, whatever they may be. So I think that you'll see those reflected in our updated logic model.
Great. Any questions from the board? Vice Chair Barnes.
I looked at your inputs, and that one thing I just wasn't seeing, and I know you just mentioned students partnering with teachers, but parents. When you talk about it, the only thing that I really saw was district stakeholders, and I guess the parent would kind of fall into that, and then there's the parent support, group support, but that's parent groups versus direct parent relationships. And I think, we've talked about it in other meetings, and having a direct communication with parents at large, and that, talking about things like surveying and communication direct. We do it every year with our calendar, which is an arduous task, obviously, but something where it's not funneling through a parent group, but funneling directly to the parent. Because when you talk about district stakeholders and the student-teacher partnership, Well, a parent's an equal partner in that too, because you're not gonna get buy-in at home necessarily if they're not in the loop and in the communication loop. So I think that's so important with what we need to do. Parental communication involvement, and I took notes when I was going over the packet over the weekend. Surveys was one thing I talked about, but, you know, for years we've talked about teacher websites as a parent portal or parent communication for important things happening in the classroom, but not every teacher is required or even does. So some do, some don't, and I think even the content is inconsistent across the board. Some give upcoming assignments and projects, others talk about what happened on a field trip. So having what you would call a set expectation of what parents can find, you know, things as, you know, as a parent myself of students, I want to know what is upcoming for projects, what's upcoming for homework, what's upcoming for tests, knowing that they are somewhat fluid based on things like, I don't want to say it right now because it's 90 degrees, but snow days. But just so we can have set expectations as well, so we can foster that partnership when our child gets to school. I just don't see that in this at all. And then, of course, you know, guidelines with Power School as well. You know, it's another great communication tool, but if it's not being used consistently, so if a teacher updates every couple of weeks or, you know, not as often as others, you don't necessarily know how well your child's doing. So I think it's all, that communication part is not in the inputs I think that need to be there.
Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead. I assumed you were going to respond.
Yeah,
Sorry.
so
I'm reading.
can I just ask, Shannon, you were thinking then it under inputs?
Under inputs, under strategies, because strategies are things like teacher websites on making your objectives and your goals fluid. So I think it falls into a couple of categories. So, you know, it's definitely an input. You know, parent communication and surveying is an input. But when you talk about strategies to get the buy-in and the results, it also includes things that needs to happen on the district end for parents, so that we're on page. So I think it falls into a couple of categories. And the objectives, obviously, is to get, you know, fluid communication, so maybe it's under objectives as well. The goals, you know, are to have that regularly and consistently updated. And the impact will be, I think, a better understanding of student, teacher, and parent involvement to get you the end result of a well-rounded result. But I just don't see the parent part in there, other than parent groups, and for that, that's funneled through a group that has a lot of different objectives, and it's not necessarily about the individual child's academic success.
I think if I see what you're saying, and you know, put another way, you know, one of the long-term results that we seek is students, parents, and staff promoting an environment that fosters self-directed, lifelong learners. And to Shannon's point, many of the strategies, objectives, and goals, if I'm paraphrasing, let me know if I'm wrong, but what I'm hearing her say is that through this, the strategies, objectives, and goals, she can see the student and staff connections in terms of the strategies, objectives, and goals of reaching that, but in terms of the parental involvement in those categories, the parents are somewhat missing, and that was some of the reading that I was going back and looking at as Vice Chair Barnes was talking, and you were looking for me to signal you to respond, and I had my head buried in the document. It was for just that reason, and I think I would agree with your point that we could probably beef that up. Yeah. Any other questions or comments? I think this is a very good representation, however, even with the amendment, of the long-term goals that we discussed at that workshop, which was very, very collaborative, staff and administration and the board working on a vision for the district. And in terms of the content that's here, I think it's really solid. So I think, to Vice Chair Barnes' point, if we can just revisit it, I think we'll have a really good plan.
So can I ask, would it make sense, the next time we meet would be September 8th, so we would put it as a separate item as compared to consent, because we need to go back and do our
I think
rework.
it might be
So
good
we
to
would
have
just
another
have it as
review.
an item, like revisited, if you will.
I think
Yes?
that would be great, and certainly in light of the fact that, we don't have full membership here, and that Ms. Gualiumi was, an integral part of the workshop as well. It would be nice to have her opinion raised as well. So that would be great. So that now takes us to item number 8, curriculum overview process revisited. So at our last meeting, Dr. McLaughlin gave a very full presentation on curriculum development within the district. He outlined the process that the curriculum committees use in order to develop curriculum. He gave an overview of the status of each subject area in terms of its either development or when it's set to be reviewed again. And out of that discussion came a board discussion about the role of board members in curriculum development and some of the challenges that exist in involving board members in curriculum development. One of those is that it's a very time-intensive process. So the staff meet on a periodic basis, about once a month, for a day that during the day board members might find it difficult to attend once a month for a day working on curriculum. The point was raised, and rightly so, that board members are not educators, and we probably shouldn't be involved in a day a month of hands-on curriculum development. Opinions were expressed, however, that some level of board involvement might be useful to the committees as well as the board in terms of socializing it. And so as we had those discussions and talked about what the best model might be, we decided to table that discussion to this meeting and talk about what makes the most sense for board involvement on curriculum committees. I regret that Ms. Gualiumi's not here tonight because I thought she actually had a very good suggestion and as we were having that discussion. And it was, if I paraphrase her, that on some periodic basis, it would be helpful for the board to hear some version, not dissimilar to what Dr. McLaughlin presented to us at the last meeting, seeing as he is the assistant superintendent for curriculum. This is his area. And that he could provide us with meaningful updates on where curriculum is headed, what the progress is, what maybe some of the issues are. But I believe, and I don't want to put words in her mouth, but I believe that she also said that there might be a role in between there for liaisons to provide a sounding board to those curriculum committees on an ongoing basis. So the reason I regret that she's not here was I thought that that was a very good balance that both acknowledged the role of staff in the development of curriculum, that they are in fact the education experts, that we are lay people, but also acknowledged the board's responsibility in local control of curriculum and providing a basis for plugging in before we get to an approval process of the curriculum very late in the game without a whole lot of board level input. So I hope I've summarized the discussion clearly. I would open it up to the board for suggestions in terms of moving forward. Yes, Mr. Schneider.
So, as timely as this may seem, I got an email today from Bill Morris about the science curriculum committee, which is meeting this week, I believe, for 3 days, where he invited me as a board member to attend all 3 days.
You can take your vacation and do science curriculum.
But seriously, though, I mean, what I in my response to him is I'm not able to make it for 3 days to do this. But I also said that I felt that it wasn't really my role to be there all 3 days and participate in the curriculum for some of the reasons that you outlined, that we're not the right people. But I did say that as a liaison from the school board, I want to be there to help them through the process. If they have questions around resources or budgeting or something along those lines, or perspective of the board, I want to be mindful to the questions they would have of us, and then be able to either give them factual information that I know as a board member, or carry questions back to this board. Not around, here's what the curriculum decision was, but rather to help them as they craft the curriculum. And I felt that as my role as a board liaison, especially knowing that we were discussing this tonight, that was the stake I put into the ground for this particular request. And I also offered that if they wanted to share with me as a liaison at the end, I'd be certainly willing to see if to try to listen. But I didn't want to put myself in the middle or do more other than to act as a resource for them, is the process. So if you ask, it's sort of what Cinda was saying the other night, is that we want Mark and the teams to report the curriculum to us and ask us questions, but as they go through their individual processes, whether it's once a month, once a quarter, to be able to be there for them should they have questions. They know somebody to come to from the school board that can answer their questions that they may have. So that's sort of the way I view it, based on our discussion the last time. So.
Any other comments? Vice Chair Barnes.
Yeah, and I agree that that could be a great resource, but if there are no questions, then what was the work? I think when it comes back to it, when you talk about updates and highlights, the things that were even being done prior to this year was, we met, and this is what we went over, and then we would get a snippet of that, like a 10-second overview of that. And I think when you talk about the emails that the liaison was even getting, I don't think that was a consistency either, and I think that will probably change, was that it's one page that all of us would benefit from. It's a one-page email of a highlight reel that all of us would benefit from. So if there was dialogue, feedback, and exchange in this liaison assignment, then there is some lifting being done. But if it's about just here's a one-page document of what happened, that's something we could all benefit from. So again, it's when you talk about an assignment means there's work involved, above and beyond getting an email and reading 10 seconds of it to the board. So if there is lifting to be had, that's great. I think some curriculum areas will have more intense work than others based upon where they are in the renewal process of their curriculum work. It's always ever evolving, as you said last month. But if there's not a lot of work to be done, there's other areas where there is a lot of work. And, maybe we need to look at how it's being done and spread out. Because I will tell you right now, I don't have one curriculum area. So for me, I wouldn't get an update anyway. It's not my light assignment. So where I would just give you updates. And right now there hasn't been feedback. So I think as a board, we need to measure what is being asked of us, how we are responding, and if it is considered quote unquote an assignment. And at the end of the day, how much work went into doing that assignment, because that way we can look at an appropriate distribution of work amongst the board members.
Mr. Schneider.
Before I ran for the school board, I asked school board members their perception about the liaison, about assignments in general. Because never being in the school board, you don't understand what all these assignments mean. And when it came to to the liaisons for the technology, for the curriculum areas. The way it was explained to me was, some years there's work being done, other years there's nothing. It's very spotty in what it is. And that when you sign up for liaison assignments on the school board, you try to sprinkle a couple of these in along with another load. Everybody should have curriculum, but everybody should have other things as well. Now, I don't view my curriculum assignments as being big work items. They're not. But I need to be there if they have a question. My role for the science and the math is, they've got a question, they need to know where to go. Because if they have to wait until and go through administration or go through PERC or something like that, it may hold them up on what they're trying to accomplish. So do some committees send me updates periodically? Yeah, they do. And I share them here, and if it's pertinent, I can send it to the whole board. I mean, frankly, I really don't care. But for me, it's one of the duties that we have as a school board member to just be there if they have questions. If we want to put a policy that our liaison assignments, we all have some, and then we all have a couple of curriculum, and we try to balance it out depending on what, because I remember at one point, there were little dots next to the sign-up sheet of the active ones that particular year versus the not. So I think if we formalize around that, but also, I'm going to put a challenge to Assistant Superintendent McLaughlin. The way you explain the way the curriculum committees work isn't the reality, because as Shannon mentioned, some are very active. Science is a really great example. They're always very reactive. Others you hardly ever hear from. And I'd like to encourage those committees to know that there are liaisons from the school board to help them, that we can answer the questions that they've got, so that when you do your periodic updates, that they know that they can get input should they need it as well. So the way you described it, your option 3, I think it was, is exactly how the science curriculum works, but it's not really how the rest of them work consistently. So,
Please.
So this is helpful, because I want to be able to support you in this. I'm just not sure I understand that part, because, I mean, rest assured, if there were questions, they'd come to you. So the absence of questions doesn't mean they're being prevented from coming to you. There are no questions. So in the case of the science group, I mean, they are an active group. There aren't other committees that are in that same stage of development as the science group is. So, for instance, this year there'll be some considerable work on math, and you can expect that there'll be the same kind of follow-up, the way that there is for science. But the absence of that hasn't meant that there have been two different ways of approaching a curriculum's work vis-a-vis the board. There's just been a different level of work. So
maybe what I'm requesting is that at least the committee, I want to make sure that people don't think that some committees really pull in the school board member and other ones shun them for some reason, because you're right, they all work differently. So maybe it would be good just to, as part of the formality with all the different committees, that they acknowledge that, or you acknowledge somehow that the school board member is known to them, that the loop is tied. And if we get nothing back, that's fine. But it just seems as though when you hear nothing, you don't know whether it's they don't know there's a representative or there's nothing to say. So that, to me, it would make it be more meaningful and at least more structured, that this role that we play within those committees is acknowledged, and even though it might not come to fruition, at least it's understood. That's all.
Or just so that I understand, so what you're saying is that when a committee is in the process of doing research, let's say, where they're doing a lot of reading and understanding what models might be available, et cetera, that updates aren't coming, and what you're saying is it would make sense for the committee to at least let the liaison know where they are in that process?
Or even that we're having the process, and this is what it is this year, so you won't hear from us. I mean, mostly it's just a one-time check-in or more periodic, just to let, not that we report back necessarily, but to at least know that they understand that there's this lifeline should they need it.
Okay.
I don't want to make more out of the liaison than
No,
it needs to
no,
be.
it shouldn't.
But I want to make people understand that we don't take these lightly. I mean, they're roles that can be used as little or as much as the committees want us to.
But by the same token, I guess I wouldn't expect then for a committee to be in that phase of work and then a month later come out with a binder that winds up on top of this table here, expecting all of us to approve it, right, as
Right.
the curriculum for that department. And I haven't seen that, but I would hope that that wouldn't
Right,
occur in that
that's where his
scenario.
role comes into play.
Yeah.
Represent by being the,
Well, and the liaison should have pre-seen what's in that binder.
well, that, to me, that's where you get into the gray area.
Yeah.
Because if the liaison is looking into the binder, that's where I agree with Shannon that, are we equipped to look at the content of the curriculum and make a judgment or a report back on that? Is that something that should be done to all of us at the same time with the knowledgeable people explaining it? I believe that we're more operational in our liaisons into it than we are
Okay,
necessarily
good.
content.
Then we're
That's-
having
is-
the discussion I hoped we would
Right,
have,
right.
which is good.
Okay.
Wonderful. Vice Chair Barnes and then Mr. Powell.
Well, that being said, if they're meeting monthly, we should get a monthly, there will be an agenda when they meet monthly, it's not gonna come to come. So if these groups are meeting monthly, we should get a monthly, email about what the agenda was and what was accomplished. Because just as they may have questions of us, we may have questions of them. And when you talk about the binder coming at the end, well, in the development is where the meat of the questions may come from us. You know, we may not want to know too much about Fontes Pinnell, but we may want to know, you know, what it has to do with, you know, the greater curriculum. So at that point, what is Fontes Pinnell? What does it mean for the development of a curriculum? Those kind of things. So where we may have questions as lay people, we can give that feedback as well. So as they're coming monthly, if we have no questions, we don't. If we do, we do. But it gives us that time where it's not toward the end, when it's all developed, that the questions come, because then you have to go back.
Do you mind if Dr. McLaughlin goes before you do, Mr. Powell? Yes, you do. I will defer to you. Okay. Dr. McLaughlin.
So since I've been here, there have been two curriculum full revisions, the arts curriculum and now this, and the science curriculum. And it has never been, I don't believe, that in either of those cases, a binder, was presented to the board. And, I mean, there is still even no binder for science. I mean, we've had periodic check-ins with the board, and I presume that those were intended both to provide the board with updates on where we are at a given point in time and opportunities for feedback and questions and concerns so that they can be addressed. And in the science and the art, it was not quite as developed. I mean, this process has refined, but I remember Sharon Putney and I periodically coming and just providing updates. So absolutely, it would never be the case that we would just work in some kind of corridor and then 3 years later just show you a binder. So my question then becomes, is the model that has become refined under science, that was kind of begun with art, is that a model that you like to continue? And is that in addition to, a monthly check-in, or would it be in place of a monthly check-in, the way, for instance, Bill and his team are planning to come, I think, in early October for, another sort of full presentation about their work to that date? So
Yeah, well,
that would be a level of clarity that would help me, just to know how to support
If they're
you.
meeting monthly, my point was, well, just, if you were gonna put out an agenda anyway, put it out to the liaison, so we know what you're doing. That way, if we do have questions or feedback proactively, we can provide it. So, you would give it to the committee, why wouldn't you give it to the liaison, is my point. And that being said, with the art, I was the liaison, and I did see it, but I saw it because I was on PERC. So, I've been on PERC since I've been on the board, and that's where I saw the art curriculum, prior to it coming before the board. So I did review it, but because I was there, not because I was liaison. Never got called as liaison.
Okay. Mr. Powell.
And I also have to say, in the 7 years that I've been on the board, I've yet to be contacted by a curriculum committee myself. Now, having said that, I don't know which committees I was assigned to, whether they were active or not, but I'm just saying, over the 7 years, I haven't heard from any, and I'm sure there was at least one that was doing something during that period of time. So to Andy's point, I think it's very inconsistent as to how we are being looped in on what's happening. I'm kind of confused as to what it is we're really trying to accomplish here. Are we trying to create a process or come up with a process to which the board members, the individual liaisons are involved, or are we trying to do away with or determine what the necessity of the liaison assignments are? Because if, for instance, Bill's group and the Science Committee is coming to us every so often to check in, what's the purpose of having a liaison at that point? To Andy's point about having a resource, if you will, I don't know if a specifically identified board member would be needed for that. You know, to be perfectly honest with you, you know, unless Andy, you can come up with something different. You were talking about budgetary questions and everything like that. I think that's all stuff that can be answered by the greenhouse, by administration. I don't think it's anything that needs specific board input on. So,
Yeah.
which way are we? I guess that's which road are we going to take? Are we
Sure.
going to continue and streamline it, or just do away with the assignments altogether?
So I can share with you, I guess, my objective for calling out a specific agenda item at this meeting is that I think it's a matter of streamlining a process that, based on everything that's been said, has an opportunity to be improved, right? Nobody's saying this is working perfectly. I do think that there are certain things that should be balanced, right? The board needs to be informed, right? The board ultimately has to approve the curriculum. How do we balance that with a process that can take some time and readily bring the board up on the details of the curriculum at the time that it needs to be approved? In terms of the liaison assignment value, so I would hold that thought, and we can talk about how that best meets the goal. I think there's an additional objective. You know, you talked about what might the role of a liaison be beyond simply getting updates. I've served last year and into this year on the technology curriculum committee, which is admittedly slightly different than the others in that there isn't, you know, a linear path from, you know, kindergarten straight up through 12th grade, even though we're talking about inculcating those skills over that time period. As someone who works in programming and technology, having hour-long conversations, multiples, with Nancy Rose, who's chairing the curriculum committee, I would believe she would say that my perspective was helpful in having conversations about what they were doing. Going on, I actually did the Day of Code project that the kids are doing in school and tried it out and gave her feedback on it. So I think there's a role for a board member who is not an educator, but who, in this case, works in a field to offer a perspective, perhaps that she might not have, or that committee might not have gotten previously. But that being said, that's not always going to be the case. So I recognize that as well. So I guess to me, the whole thing would be, how do we stay in the loop such that we're aware of what's going on, can provide input and guidance so that we come out with a product that is developed by staff but informed by the board such that it can be readily approved at the time that it comes out. That would be the goal. And, you know, maybe it isn't a liaison assignment. Maybe it is, in fact, board updates, and we just revert to that. I'm open to whatever's going to work best for the board and for the curriculum committees. Ultimately, we want the best product. We don't want to bog things down. Yes, Mr. Powell.
Well, if I can offer a suggestion then, since we're not the ones that would be responsible for doing the updating, could we ask that the assistant superintendent and his team kind of put together a pros and cons list of liaison versus periodic updates as to which they think would work better. Certainly we don't want to reinvent the wheel. And if you and your curricula team see value in having a dedicated liaison, then absolutely tell us, and we'll, you know, stick with that and do whatever it is that you need us to do. However, if you think that there's better value in hearing from the 5 of us at the same time through periodic updates, then let us know that as well. And certainly that's not a question that I expect you to answer right now. You know, I'm sure you need to go back and do some questions, you know, reflect on it and see what that is. So, and I also, it's not something that I would want to make a decision on tonight without Sunda being here as well, because I'm sure she has some very valid points as well. So if we could set it as a future agenda item at some point, not in the budget season, and have Mark come back to us and let us know what he and his team thinks.
You realize that's approaching very quickly, don't you? I would agree with tabling a final decision on this until Ms. Guagliumi's back. I guess the one point I would make is I think, to Dr. McLaughlin's point, we have been getting periodic updates. I think what we're looking for is just broader, more across the board updates on what's going on with each of the tracks. Yeah, Mr. Schneider.
For me, it's all a matter of making sure the curriculum committees get what they need out of us.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that I'd like to see maybe more often updates, even if there's not a lot to say, but the status of where some of them are. Maybe there's every meeting has a curriculum corner, or once a month we have that where Mark goes through and says, here's the active curriculum things that are going on, and this group met and this group met, just so we know where they're at. And then periodically they'll come and present if there's something meaningful to present. Maybe that's sufficient, but I want to make sure that the committees are not expecting something out of us in an interim fashion that could be handled through the liaison. I'm not married to the I'll stop talking. I'm not married to the liaison, because the reason that I keep them is because I want to be there should they need us. I don't want to get in the middle of the meetings and craft the curriculum. I mean, that's not my job. I mean, I want to participate in, and as a board member, one of the members, feedback input into the curriculum that they develop. And getting interim updates allows us to be iterative. So, you know, we're helping through the process. If they request a member of the board to dig deep down, maybe we talk at the table about who's appropriate to do it. You know, like you do in technology. I mean, there's, for me, math would be good because, that was my major, but on the other hand, they haven't got to that point. So, but I don't have to be a liaison to do that if that's something that's needed. So I'd really like the administration to dictate to us what they need, but I would request as a board member that we get more frequent updates, at least to the status of what's going on, whether that's through liaison or through, Mark's monthly update. I don't care one way or the other, but I don't want us to start. I don't want us to use these liaison assignments as fodder against other liaison assignments and that thing. I want to serve the need that they have and be responsive as a board. That's mine.
And to produce the best curriculum possible. Yep, I would agree. Okay, So we will put this on one of our September agendas. That takes us to item number 9, Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, or FERC, gas pipeline scoping meeting outcome. I'm going to turn this over to Vice Chair Barnes for an update, but I do want to thank her. At our July meeting, we took a vote, wrote a letter to FERC and copied all of our elected representatives, and stating our unanimous opposition to a pipeline route that would go within 1,000 feet of one of our schools. And when the scoping meetings came up, I had to be out of town on business, and Vice Chair Barnes represented us at those scoping meetings. So I want to thank her for doing that and ask for her update.
Thank you. I will tell you that I attended only the July 29th Nashua meeting because it was apparent at the July 29th meeting that there was not going to be enough space at the July 30th meeting in Milford for repeat offenders, as you would say, or repeat speakers. That being said, I did attend the July 29th meeting in Nashua with the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission that they were hosting, and I brought back for the board, in your packets you will have every document that FERC made available to us to educate us about the process of application, about our docket, which is the project that's assigned to Southern New Hampshire at this point. And you have all of that for your review. So you have what you would call the balanced, I guess, the government perspective on this project. That being said, what you need to know about that night's meeting is 18 elected officials in Southern New Hampshire spoke, and not one of them spoke favorably to this project. For the state of New Hampshire, it was the Speaker of the House. Our Executive Counselor Wheeler spoke in opposition of it, and a couple of elected officials in different communities, including state representatives. But regarding the town of Merrimack, our town council chair spoke of her concerns. And that being said, one of the concerns that took the breath of the room was that part of the process is for Kinder Morgan to come in and do surveys. And when they asked for Merrimack's permission to do surveys, they wouldn't agree to doing the surveys with Merrimack because Merrimack asked to be present. And because they asked to be present, they declined. So they don't want us present at surveying our town property. So we thought that was a bit alarming. And that was something that Chair Harrington, giving her proper credit, made sure to be clear to FERC that it was something that we were not welcome at the survey of our own town land. So I want our constituents to be aware of that as well. The second speaker for Merrimack was Lon Woods, who is the chair of the Merrimack Village District. They oversee all the drinking water in town facilities. That being said, all of our schools are using MVD water. So at our last meeting, I know we discussed the concerns about water contamination. They shared their concerns because the aquifer would definitely be impacted by the routes that they're recommending. And so therefore it would affect every building in our district. So although we worried about the incineration zone in our vote last meeting in July, it will definitely impact the whole district because 95% of this town does use MVD water. So according to our town manager. Since that meeting, or actually right before that meeting, Senator Kelly Ayotte got word of our letter and our vote against having any pipeline within an incineration zone. And she spoke in Washington during a Senate Commerce Committee hearing and specified that although our town has spoken out against it, our MVD spoke out against it, it was our vote at this table that got the attention of Kelly Ayotte and got recognition on the floor as a concern of this project. So she talked about the incineration zone being an unacceptable place to put a pipeline, as well as anything near wetlands that would impact the water. So that being said, we did have a very effective vote in our July meeting in getting our concerns heard at the federal level. So I still think as a board that we should consider expressing our concern for the potential water contamination being that it will definitely impact every building in our district if this pipeline does, in fact, contaminate the water source. So that's something I would like us as a board to consider either tonight or at a future meeting. If you need more information, then we can definitely look at a future meeting, but it's something that still is of concern to this district and should be. So that's the highlight. There's more to come. I think if you look at your board package, you'll see that mid-October, I think it's the 16th, there will be a deadline for applications, but still more pipeline routes could be proposed between now and then, and even since then. So once the application is in, they could still make changes to that route. So it's something that we as a board still need to be cognizant of. I think also at our last meeting we talked about communicating and working with the town council. They have retained counsel at the town council and will be able to give us well-rounded updates about the project and its impact on our community. So that's the update that I have.
Thank you. And as a follow-up to that item, the day after our meeting, I had a conversation with Chair Harrington, and she recognized the board's position. She discussed the fact that they were retaining counsel and looking at alternatives, and that when the time made sense to get together, she agreed that we should work together in the town's best interest. So I will continue to stay in touch with her and look to her for guidance, as they're getting quite a bit of it on, and rightly so, on the appropriate time frame for doing that. So thank you. That takes us to item number 10, New Hampshire Department of Transportation planned improvements to Route 101A. At our last meeting, I shared the fact that the New Hampshire Department of Transportation had sent to me, and I shared this letter with the board, a meeting, notice of a meeting that they were holding here in Town Hall on July 27th to present folks with proposed plans for improvements to the intersection at Continental Boulevard with 101A, which is the St. John Newman intersection, up to the intersection with, I'm trying to remember the name of the road. Yes, Craftsman. And so I attended this meeting on July 27th. It was actually a well-attended meeting. There were probably 30 some odd people here, I guess. And the New Hampshire Department of Transportation presented a plan for this intersection, which came out of a report that was generated as part of a 10-year plan survey back in 2004, I believe is the date that they said. So it's been on the 10-year plan 11 years. And they have preliminary plans that include crosswalks at Continental, increased sidewalk on different sides of the street, and it also includes closing down Craftsman, which is by the Baptist church there, but that involves an easement between the church and the town, so there's more work there. So the question that I asked, because I knew that if a project were to commence that was going to start digging that up, that we had some bus routes that go through that area that we might need to reroute. And when I asked the project manager when the project was slated, he said 2024. And so because of the way that things get budgeted in these 10-year plans, 2024 is probably the most likely time. It could get pulled up, but it's out there. This was really just preliminary plan sharing with area residents. And so I breathed a sigh of relief that there was nothing immediate. I needed to come back and ask Mr. Chevenel to scramble around. So anyway, that's the update. Nothing imminent, but I will give the Department of Transportation great credit in terms of their outreach, their openness. They had huge diagrams. We're very interested in hearing feedback, which they got very good feedback on some of the things that were being proposed and what some of the issues are. So I give them credit, but I don't think anything imminent is coming of this. Nothing that we need to react to anyway. Any questions? Yes, Mr. Schneider.
I think it's ironic, it's been on the 10-year plan for 11 years, and 9 years from now, the 10-year plan may actually start to happen, maybe, so. I just adding the numbers is putting an advocacy here.
Yep. That takes us to item number 11, other correspondence. I actually have a few things, and then I'll go to the board. The first is, and I shared this with the board, we just discussed the letter that was sent to FERC, for which we copied all of our elected representatives. I shared with the board that Senator Ayotte sent back an acknowledgement note and detailing the actions that she's taken as it relates to the pipeline. Also, I received an email today from Barbara Poblikover, who is the head of our district special ed parent support group, and she asked me to promote the fact that on September 29th, from 7 to 9 in the Little Theater at the high school, Lynn Lyons, who is I believe a Bedford resident and a licensed social worker and renowned author, who previously gave a talk on anxiety and the anxiety issue in particular with children, through popular demand, is coming back to give a talk on 7 ways to stop the worry cycle. And so that is September 29th from 7 to 9. And as well, we received an email from a parent who referenced a new law that's going into effect regarding social media policy and privacy issues, asking the board to take up the social media policy, revisit that, and so we will be looking at that. Any other correspondence?
That was the one I had, and just, are we going to be looking at our technology policy and how it relates to the new RSAs, and I'm sure we can get some information from the NHSBA to help guide us.
Great. Thanks. Any other correspondence? Okay. Seeing none, comments? Vice Chair Barnes.
We're very local, but, very global as a school district, I would say. And as many people know, that we have a partnership with China in the Tianjin area, and they have recently had explosions in that area. It's made world news, and it's definitely probably impacting the students in school district that we partner with abroad. So we send our students there every year, and they send their students here. So as a member of this board, and I'm sure the board can express the same sentiment, but our thoughts are definitely with those at that sister school in Tianjin, and hoping that family and friends of the students and staff are safe from harm.
Thank you for mentioning that. Yes, my daughter reached out to her friends over there and actually heard back from a number of them that now Megan graduated 2 years ago, but that the all of her friends and the school are fine, but it was a horrific explosion, just awful. So yes, our thoughts are with them. Any other comments from the board? Item number 12, new business. Superintendent Chaffrey.
So I think I said earlier about our next board meeting, but because it doesn't follow normal schedule, meaning it's on a Tuesday, the day after Labor Day, or the first day of school for students, I wanted to just say it so that our public would realize it, and also say that I would assume that our time will go back to normal, which would be 7:30 p.m. So September 8th, 7:30 p.m.
Mr. Powell?
Is there a reason why it can't remain at 7?
Well, I seem to recall, I've got no issues with it. It's really the will of the board. I seem to recall, and you guys can refresh me if I'm wrong, that when we originally started shifting the meeting times, it was to accommodate student
Right.
groups that were coming. And then we talked about the summer meeting schedule, and boy, wouldn't it be good to meet earlier as well. And the suggestion was raised, shouldn't we just make this meeting time, our meeting time indefinitely? And I seem to recall not everybody agreed that that was a great idea, that we should see how it goes and go from there. And I wish Ms. Guagliumi was here, because I seem to think she might have been the one who might have had a concern. Mr. Schneider, but I'm fine with it if the board's fine with it.
Well, I think an interesting thing has occurred, because at the same time we've also done early this summer, we've also had non-publics that have occurred before.
Right.
And starting the meeting at 7 and having an hour non-public really starts these things early. And I found it a little problematic, almost that one. So I'm okay with 7:30, because it buys us a half an hour to potentially do non-public if we need to. If we make it 7, it almost always is going to push the non-public at the end. So
Right.
I think 7:30 gives us a little more flexibility potentially. Although we should look, I mean that's just my viewpoint, what I've observed, right? I think doing non-publics before has some value, because we sort of go through the process more quickly. But that being said, if we want to start at 7 to do the non-publics afterwards, if that's the pleasure of the board, I can live with that as well. So.
Vice Chair Barnes.
And Marge had her hand up too, right?
Oh, I'm sorry.
So, well, my thought is, at one point, we had a really hardy non-public night, and so what we did was, as a precautionary, we put an after that we actually didn't need, so we just adjourned at that point. So if we did make adjustments, I would say, and we needed non-public, we would do it before and after. And I'm okay with 7 o'clock. I think I'm probably the one that's got the squirreliest commute, although, yours has some special days, I'm sure. But that being said, if, my employer definitely looks at the value of what we do here in public service. So if I have to bag early and make up time afterward, that's fine too. So if that, I have no concern with it.
So what if we did, Superintendent?
Well, I was just going to suggest, does it make sense, where Cinda isn't here this evening, to schedule September 8th at 7:30, which would be the normal time, and reassess it when she's here, when you're a fivesome, and then that sets the course into the future, and I'm going to have a better sense of non-public too. What I really thought was beneficial is not having non-public at 10 o'clock in the evening. It just seems that it's more advantageous to go earlier. But I do think where you're not sitting as a board of 5, that 7:30 has been the normal time, and then the board can reassess.
You said what I was thinking. Any comments? Nope. So that's how we will proceed. Thank you. Any other new business? Seeing none, we'll move to item 13, committee reports. Mr. Schneider.
So on August the 6th, just a couple weeks ago, Merrimack Safeguard met. There was we just really quick, we went over the, sort of recap the heroin forum that was held during the summer, so that was viewed as a big success. Chief Doyle was actually at the meeting and summarized that. We then got into a discussion about the upcoming meetings around the marijuana dispensary that's going to be proposed. Tonight is the 17th. Tomorrow night on the 18th, I believe they're coming in front of the planning board. And then on Thursday, the 20th, is the in front of the town council, I believe, where the more open discussion will be, the public forum will be. We talked a little bit about some of the state guidelines, and we talked about, the zoning things that are being proposed. We just talked in passing. One of the things that we asked Chief Doyle to do was he gave an example of a town in Connecticut that has recently brought in a marijuana dispensary but doesn't have, there's no public marijuana, it's just the dispensary like Merrimack would be. Because one of the things that the coalition wanted to understand was what the town has seen since the dispensary has come in, what the impact, because there was a lot of concerns about, illegal use, proximities, crime rates, things along those lines. So the chief took an action to try to get that. So hopefully at our September meeting, he'll have some data. Now, of course, these hearings will have occurred prior to that, but it's all sort of happening real time. So, but that was talked about at the meeting. We talked about some of our focus groups having meetings that we need to occur. There'll be a formal take-back event for drugs on September 26th. There is the drop box at the police station all the time, but they will be having a formal take-back event on the 26th. And we're talking about doing some more results and environmental scans in the future meetings. So.
Thank you. Other committee reports. Vice Chair Barnes.
On the 21st, Greater Woods Subcommittee met, and just for your edification, I have been renewed for another 3-year term as a citizen at large. Oh, thank God. But that being said, during the meeting, which was very productive, we went through basically outstanding items, and one is Appendix E, which is essentially in the stewardship plan, and that is the to-do list. And that's something that obviously, when it was crafted and presented and approved, it was established. Well, a lot of work's been done since then, and a lot of work is still going on. So we basically took things off the, and it has to be done by the Conservation Commission, but things that can come off the list, and then things that still need to be done. So we reprioritized. And with that, we are not having a meeting in August, but we are having a working day on August 23rd, which is this Sunday. So we will be out there working on trails, clearing them up, getting one with nature, all that good stuff. But that being said, more hands makes lighter work. So if you are interested in knowing more about it or going out to Greater Woods to do some trail work, get to know the area better, a lot of committee members will be there that can acclimate you to the benefits of it while you're benefiting the community. So the chair of the Greater Woods Subcommittee is Matt Caron. If you have questions and want more information, you can email him at mcaron, that's MCARON, at merrimacknh.gov. And we are scheduled to go out into the woods 9 a.m. on Sunday if you're available.
Excellent. Thank you. Mr. Schneider.
I just thought I'd mention that Planning and Building has tried to meet a couple times this summer to go through the capital improvement plan that administration would like to present to them before they present to us, but they have not been able to do that with the members. So hopefully it'll occur before our next meeting or whatever. So keep trying.
Yep. And one other thing on Greater Woods.
Thank you.
Matt, thank you. We put out 3 more signs on Greater Woods at the borders of the perimeter of the school district property, prohibited, explain that things like motor vehicles and firearms are prohibited.
Excellent. Thank you. If there are no more committee reports, we'll move to item 14, which is public comments on agenda items. And I will close that as I see no public. We will take a moment to sign the manifest, and I will entertain a motion to adjourn, made promptly by Vice Chair Barnes, seconded almost as promptly by Board Member Powell. All those in favor say aye. The motion carries 4-0-0. Thank you, everyone. Good night.
survey that we come up with have to get approved by somebody in Washington or something like that? In other words, after we approve it, or has it already been approved?